Welcome back to r/neighbors from hell, where people share stories about their crazy neighbors, and if you are new to my channel, please don't forget to subscribe to join our amazing community, and without any further ado, let's dive right into the stories. The first one is titled, "Neighbor used a bulldozer to create illegal trails on my property and claimed he owns my land. I set out traps and I taught him a lesson." Hey everybody, I'm from Slovenia and want to tell you all what happened on my property between me and my neighbor. I have a large plot of land that at some point goes into a forest. A little bit of the forest is on my land and the rest of it belongs to the country. I really like having my own little forest area because I can do things like camp close to the house while still feeling like I am in nature. The neighbor that lives next to me is not very nice and likes to hang out a lot with his friends. It never bothered me that much until my neighbor thought that some of my land should be his. He comes on it a lot of the time with his friends and they hang out in the forest area that I own. When I told him to leave, he always just says that he actually owns half of my land and can get me arrested for living on it. I don't want to start a big fight with him, so I let it go. That turned out to be a big mistake because he starts to get more aggressive with the things that he does. He rented a bulldozer and used it to knock down a ton of trees from that forest area that I own and dig up a ton of my land to make trails. I am very angry about this, and it turns out he wanted to use the trails that he made to ride motorcycles with his friends. It made almost a full circle, so I think they were trying to make a trail around and through my forest to race. I didn't try and talk to him again because I knew he would tell me that the land belonged to him and he was allowed to destroy all of the trees. I put up signs that said no trespassing so that maybe they would scare him and keep him out. However, he ignored the signs and he comes back often with the friends riding motorcycles. When they were all gone, I went to the trail and decided to set some traps for them. I thought about a big hidden rock, but I did not want them to actually get hurt. Instead, I made some holes in the trail and covered them up with leaves so that they would get a tire stuck in it. The next day I knew it happened when I heard yelling, and then I called the police about the trespassers. This way, by the time they arrived, they would see what was actually happening. I thought they would get in big trouble for making the trails and destroying my property, but they didn't. They told the police that the trails were built a long time ago and they had permission to use them. The most police could do was to tell them to stay off of my property because I had the signs that said no trespassing. I could tell my neighbor was angry, but I did not know that he was going to try and get revenge on me for the traps that I set. He rented the bulldozer again and started to destroy more of my forest. What he did not know was that I installed cameras on my property, because originally I wanted to catch him using the trails again. Instead though, I now had footage of him destroying my property and I called the police with the video evidence I had. I was still very sad because most of my little forest was now gone and I could not enjoy nature while staying on my own private property anymore. I didn't want to be pushed around by the neighbor anymore, and this was the final straw. I was not going to stop until I taught him a lesson about destroying other people's properties. He delayed everything by claiming he owned the forest area, and nothing could continue until a man came out and looked over the property to figure out where mine ended and his started. After he confirmed that the forest area that he built the trails on was mine, I could sue him properly. This was actually the biggest mistake he made, but I will explain why in a little bit. The video pretty much showed everything and he had no defense except the claim that he thought the land was his. Nobody believed him and he had to pay me $60,000, obviously in the local currency, for the land of mine that he destroyed. This way I could try to plant more trees and fix some of what he destroyed. It would be a long time though before my part of the forest is what it used to be. I also wanted to get rid of the trails he made and plant grass there again to make it look normal. The trails made it look weird, and since it was just dirt, it looked like my grass was not planted properly or something. Back to how he made a big mistake by making the guy come out and look at the land. It turns out that not all of what he destroyed was the forest on my property. He went further than that and actually started bulldozing the forest that is behind my land. That part of the forest is not owned by a person but by the government so that it can be preserved and no company can come and try to chop down the trees for lumber. They told him that destruction of government property was a different crime and that one held not a fine but a jail sentence. He looked so shocked and scared when he found out what he had done and tried to argue that he didn't know and it was not his fault. It was on the video though, and since he was not supposed to be over there anyway, they were going to send him to jail for a year because of it. I had no idea that was going to happen, because even I don't know exactly where my property ends and the rest of the forest begins. I only knew that the part close to my house was technically on my property. That part of the forest was going to be replanted by the government and the workers were nice enough to help me with planting the trees I spent the money on. Just so you know, not everyone here is like my neighbor and most of the people are actually really nice and friendly. Someone else ended up moving into my neighbor's home while he was in jail, so I assumed that he had to sell it. My new neighbor is much nicer and actually became a pretty good friend to me. We ended up camping on my property in the little forest and it is growing back very nicely. The grass also grew back, so those horrible trails are gone. I think that neighbor learned a very good lesson that if you push someone that seems nice too far, you are going to end up getting in a world of trouble. I'm easygoing as long as you are not doing anything too wrong or hurting anyone. As soon as you mess with my property and destroy trees, I'm going to make sure though that you have a miserable time. And yeah, ripe stars, this story especially, and recently I have to say a lot of the stories prove that entitlement does not know any borders and pretty much entitled people exist on every single continent and in every single country. A lot of the stories I used recently are actually not from Reddit and some of them are even from foreign countries, like in this case Slovenia. I think it is very interesting to get a sort of international perspective on these stories because a lot of the content on Reddit is usually just from the US. Either way, if you enjoy the stories, I would very much appreciate it if you could like the video because that would help me tremendously. Thank you so much in advance. And the next one is titled Karen is Insane. So when I was around 6 years old, I lived with my family in a nice house in a small city in Poland. It was a quiet neighborhood on the outskirts of town and pretty much all the neighbors knew each other. There was no sidewalks around the part of the street I lived at, only one crappy sidewalk that started on the other side in front of my neighbor's house. It is important to remember that the sidewalk was very old and in bad shape. Still to this day, people are asking the city to fix it. This story is about that particular neighbor, Karen. She was an older lady. Everyone suspected that she really did not have anything better to do than gather gossip and disturb everyone trying to rule the street. Everyone was commenting that if you wanted to get the whole area to know something, you had to tell her that message as a secret. Whenever someone came to visit us, they usually parked their car in front of our property. But on bigger meetups like barbecues or parties, people would park in front of our closest neighbors' houses too. That never was a problem, no gates were obstructed and no one was disturbed. Well, almost. Because Karen hated when somebody parked in front of her house, she would always run out yelling about how we dare to park our filthy cars on her precious sidewalk. And meanwhile, my mother is not someone that lets someone yell at her. She had many discussions with Karen about the laws and rules that stated that she does not own anything outside her fence, which means that the sidewalk is public and anyone can park on it as long as they leave enough space for a wheelchair to pass. However, that was not enough. Every time someone would come to us and park their car there, the yelling would start. Until one time when my mother's friend Tomek came for a coffee during winter. He is a local policeman and his specialty is road law. So my mother tells him about Karen and her behavior regarding the sidewalk. Tomek laughs since that thing was in such a bad shape that it can barely even be called a sidewalk. When he was leaving, he assured my mom that he would step by next day for a coffee on his lunch break. The next day comes by and I was playing with my brother in the snow. We see a black car pulling over in front of Karen's house, and as the driver gets out, Karen storms out of her house yelling, "Karen, you cannot park here. This is my sidewalk. Get your filthy car off my property." Well, there he was, Tomek with his full uniform, hat and all, turning around towards Karen as comically as he could. T, excuse me? You tell me that I cannot park my car here? Karen, yes, but this is a sidewalk open to the public. Karen, yes, this is my sidewalk. So let me get this straight. This is your sidewalk? Yes. And you're the one responsible for taking care of it? Karen proudly, well, yes I am. That's why I don't allow anyone to park here. T, oh, that's so nice that I found you. Since it is your sidewalk, you're responsible for clearing the snow from it to not create danger for the people walking on it. Since it was not plowed, I need to write you a fine for endangering public safety, he says as he pulls out his note block. Karen, but no other sidewalks are plowed. T, oh, it doesn't matter. The other sidewalks belong to the city. The clearing crew is working on cleaning them. But since this sidewalk is yours, it is your responsibility. Karen, but I'm old. I cannot shovel the snow. T, then you need to hire someone to do that. Of course, if this sidewalk happened to be of public property. Karen, yes, it is not mine. T, but a moment ago you were yelling at me that it was. So what is it? Is it yours or not? Because I don't know if I should fine you now. Karen, no, it is not mine. T, alright, seems like we cleared that up. Now, if you ever harass anyone like you did with me, it could result in a fine. So I recommend you watching out on what you claim to be yours. And then he proceeded to cross the street and enjoy a coffee in our house. Karen never disturbed anyone for parking in front of her house again. She would only stare at people trying to burn holes in their skulls with her side. The next one is titled Ice Cold Revenge. This is a story from my parents about my great-grandmother. She passed well before my birth but lives on mainly through this story and other small anecdotes. She was my father's maternal grandma, so not much has been shared about her, but this story is my favorite. The cast is Maria, my great-grandmother, Julia, my great-aunt, and Richard, the neighbor. So, it is a cold, snowy day in New York City in either the mid-late 80s or the early 90s, pre-1995. Maria and Julia were shoveling the street in front of their apartment, clearing parking spots for not only their cars but also for Maria's husband who was away at work. They spent a fair amount of time doing so due to the large amount of snow. As soon as they finished and put the shovel away, Richard drove up and immediately took the spot. The two of them went up to Richard to try and explain that they were shoveling the spot for the family member who would not be home until late. But Richard had none of it. He cursed them out and walked about a few feet to his apartment. Julia and Maria watched him go inside. Almost as soon as he got inside, Maria told Julia to get the shovel. They spent another hour or so shoveling in Richard's car, covering it completely with the snow they had cleared moments before. Once the car was very much covered, Maria took a kettle and poured hot water over the car, ensuring that the New York City freezing cold weather would turn the snow-covered car into a big block of ice. Richard did not leave the house until the next morning when he had to go to work. He saw the car and immediately became enraged. Maria was at the window with a cup of coffee, smiling and waving to him when he turned towards her apartment. According to Maria, it took Richard at least 3 hours to get the car out. And she watched him the entire time with her good cup of coffee. And the next one is titled, I Got Them Towed. My fiancé, 30 female, and I, 29 male, barely moved into this house a few months ago. The first week we noticed a car parked right on our driveway, which obviously did not belong there. When we went outside, the lady who lived next door asked if this was okay. Her house is right at the corner of the street and there is no driveway. She said the last owner was fine with letting her park there, so she hoped that we would not mind. Our driveway is big enough for 2 cars, so we said for now it was okay. After our son was born and I had to go back to work, we decided to buy a second car so it is easier for her to get around. All 3 cars don't fit, so we had to tell our neighbor that she cannot park there anymore. Ever since, it has become a whole issue. Once she was parked behind me when I was leaving early in the morning, so I had to go banging on her door at 6 a.m. She had the audacity to be mad for waking her up. I reminded her that she cannot park there again, so we thought she got the message. The second time was when we were on our way home from the park. She was already parked there, so we would have had to park behind her. I went to go knock and she said she was just putting her groceries away since we were not home and the driveway is closer. This last time when it happened, my car was not working, so my brother came to pick me up early. My fiancé had to take our son to his 4-month appointment, but the lady's damn car was parked right behind her, so there was no way for her to pull out of the driveway. She told me the neighbor was not answering the door. It got late, so she had to reschedule his appointment. I came home after and called the cops to come deal with this because I was just so tired. Since they could not reach her, they did end up towing her car. Once she found out, she was at my door angry, so she was a few blocks down at a friend's house, which is why she did not answer, but now she says she is stressed because she does not have the money to get her car back and it is our fault. Of course. Since both our cars were there, she assumed we were home and if anything we would have used my car to pull out of the driveway. My neighbor kept complaining how effed out we are going to that extreme, making her lose her car when she absolutely needs it. We have just ignored her since, but now every time we are stepping out, she glares right at us. I've had my car towed before, so we know it is a nightmare of a fee to get it out of impound. That's why I ask if I am the a-hole. It's been almost a week since this happened, with still no sign of her car parked on the street, so obviously she has not gotten it back yet. And yeah, ripe stars, I will redirect this question to you guys. Do you think that OP was the a-hole in the story or not? Please let us know what you think in the comments. And the next one is titled, "You cannot put a lion on a house not in your community." So this happened years ago when I was in elementary school, so maybe 15 years ago, and I was living in Florida at the time. Anyone who lives in Florida knows how often new gated communities just pop up. So our neighborhood was established and has been before I even moved into the house. The house once belonged to my uncle. We had a neighborhood watch but no HOA. The gated community was finally built and people were moving in. Now, we don't have a bad neighborhood, but we had some strange colored houses. Lime green and magenta with giant metal lizards hanging all over it is an example of one. Our house was simple, hand brick and half concrete painted white. It stood out compared to some of the other houses. The new gated community is a HOA community and they thought they ruled overall. Soon people in our neighborhood were receiving fines for their house color choices, their unsightly cars, not approved mailboxes and other nitpicky things. My parents received some for my dad's boat being in the driveway and even our unruly yard. We had a bougainvillea which grows like crazy and we were constantly trimming it. And we even got a fine for our fence. The old fence was chain link and the new fence was a wooden privacy fence. Don't ask why we had two different fences. My uncle only fenced in part of the house. It was still good fence, so my dad did not want to rip it out. Well, my mom and dad would just pitch anything they saw coming from that gated community as they had fancy stationery. This went on for maybe 4 or 5 months. We would revive fines for not meeting HOA standards and other violations. We talked to our neighbors and they received them too. They tried to call and complain, but were given the runaround and decided to pitch the mail as well. My mom received a phone call from her bank. They started to question her about the lien on the house that just appeared in the system. My parents had less than a year left on their payment for the house. They always paid extra every month for the house loan and were always in time. My mom was super confused and said there should not be a lien. We don't have a reason for there to be a lien. Turns out the gated community filed liens on almost every house in my neighborhood. My mom told the bank the situation and called a lawyer. I'm not all sure what happened, but I know a lot of the members of that HOA faced felony fraud charges and it was just a huge mess with a pretty big lawsuit against the HOA board. We were able to pay off the house after the lawsuit. We even had a big celebration on one of the roads, a huge cookout, and we met people we did not know before. I even made new friends with some kids that I did not even know existed. People moved out of the gated community due to bad press and a lot of the houses stood empty for a long time. When I moved away, there were still a lot of houses empty and it was like a ghost town. Last I heard, the name of the community changed and the houses were being filled up. So I guess the lesson is, leave our bright houses alone and mind your own business.
Oh, what a monster. Fluffy cat monster. Can we do this here? Some exercise.
And ripe stars, with this we have reached the end of the video. However, if you still cannot get enough of my content, then I would highly suggest to check out my endless binge watch playlist, which will soon show up in the left corner of the screen. In addition, I would really appreciate it if you could not only subscribe to the channel but also turn on the bell notifications, which you can do by clicking on the little bell icon right next to the subscribe button. This will help my channel tremendously and this will make sure that you don't miss any of my videos. Furthermore, if you want to see additional ripe content that I don't post on YouTube, then I would suggest to head on over to patreon.com/ripeyoutube for more than 50 exclusive videos that you will not see anywhere else. Thank you so much for your amazing daily support and I hope to see you again tomorrow.